Right, hello. Welcome everyone to another Study in Estonia webinar. This one is the third in a series that we started this spring. And we're really happy that so many of you have been joining us for these different topics that we've been covering. I do hope everyone is doing okay in the face of this slightly different situation that we've been going through. I hope it's not interfering a lot with your studies or with your graduation plans, which is coming up pretty soon. I'd like to think we've covered topics in these webinars that have been useful to people in different ways. So if you are an international student trying to find a job in Estonia, we talked about how you can nail your job interview. If you are a student looking to start your own business, we talked about how you can do that, how you can start a company, how you handle the paperwork, which form of company to choose. And now today we will be talking about if you are an international student here in Estonia and you're graduating soon and you're looking to return to your home country or maybe even move on to another country entirely. Then today we will be talking about how you can stay connected to Estonia through a wonderful thing called EResidency. So today we have Lina and Mats joining us from the EResidency team, who will be talking you through exactly what this program is that us Estonians are really proud of, how it can help you, and what steps you can take to actually become an EResident yourself as well. So a few more technical details before I give the floor to Lina and Mats. We will be recording this webinar similarly to the last ones. We'll make this recording available to you afterwards, so we'll send this link to you by email. Also ask questions. Mats and Lina are more than happy to answer whatever questions you may have. Submit everything that you want to ask to the questions box, and then we'll cover the questions at the end of the webinar after Lina and Mats have finished their presentation. So from my end, that will be all right now, and I'll give the floor over to Elina, who will start us off. Okay, so enjoy, guys.
Thank you so much for such a nice introduction. Good morning, everyone. It's really nice to see you all here. As already mentioned, today's topic is how EResidency can help you to stay connected to Estonia after graduation. So I hope that all of you can see my screen. Mats, can you give me a sign that you can see my screen? Yes, all good. So on this photo is actually our office. And in the center, you can see the president of Estonia walking out together with our head of EResidency. So this is the place where the magic happens. Let's say like that. This is the place where EResidency was born, and this is the place where we run the program from. And on the right side, you can see also the Chief Officer for Happiness, our office dog, who is keeping us all energized and in a good shape to deliver this program to you. And I think all of you are ready to hear about residency. So let's start. So I would really like to start this presentation from sharing one email with you. So that's the email that we received just a few days ago. And I think it pretty well summarizes the content of our webinar today. And as far as we know, most of you are currently international students in Estonia, and soon you'll be leaving back to your country of residence or country of origin. And perhaps you are wondering how to keep connection to Estonia after you have left the country physically. So as you can see from this email, we have seen these cases before. My hope is that at the end of this webinar, you will have answers to the questions that this person has asked in the email. So you will know how to transition from a resident of Estonia to EResident, what kind of benefits does EResidency give you, And also we will cover one of the benefits in more detail. It's more specifically how to establish and run a company remotely by being an e-resident. So let's move forward and take a quick look at our agenda. So we will talk what is e-residency, who are e-residents, why would you become an e-resident, how to become an e-resident, and finally we will have some time for your questions. So e-residency. E-residency is a government-issued digital ID and status that provides access to Estonian e-services. So this is the official description of what e-residency is. In other words, e-residency is a digital status. It is not a residence permit. It is not a citizenship. It does not mean that you are a tax resident of Estonia. It also doesn't give you access to Estonia or any other European country simply because it is not a document for identification or a travel document. So as you can see on the right side of the screen, this is the e-residency kit, and that's the box that all new e-residents are getting. So inside this e-residency kit, there is a e-residency card. You can actually see it through a small window in the center of this box. So this card is quite similar to the ID card that you might have as an international student in Estonia. The difference is that it does not have a photo on it because it's mostly meant for using in online environment. And together with this card, you will also get USB reader and PIN codes and to your card to be able to use it securely. So one important note is that e-residency can be granted only to those that are not citizens or residents of Estonia. So we will talk about this a little bit later as well, when I will cover the process of transitioning from a resident to e-resident. But I think it's also important to note this in this particular slide. So moving further, let's take a look at what kind of benefits does the residency card give you. So I would say the most usable or practical use of e-residency card is the ability to digitally sign documents. So the residency card has the highest security level granted by European Union, which basically means that the digital signature given through this card equals to a handwritten signature, and it is recognized in most of the European Union countries. So it's actually a very handy tool to have because you don't really need to go anywhere to sign the documents. You don't need to print them out, to scan them back. It's really quick. You can sign the documents from your bedroom, you can sign the documents from the beach, or basically wherever you are. The second usage of your residency card is that you can encrypt and send documents securely. So let's imagine the situation that you need to send a copy of your passport through email to somebody. And as we know, there have been a lot of cases when email boxes were hacked, the information leaked, and you might be worried that your personal data wouldn't get into the hands of people that were not intended to get this information. So the residency card helps you to encrypt such documents and send them securely so that only the person who is intended to get this document will be able to see it. The third benefit is that you will basically retain the access to a wide range of public and private services of Estonia. So if you already have an ID card as an international student in Estonia, you know that with this card you can access a whole range of different services, starting from e-health, e-taxes, e-financials, e-police, and anything else what you can imagine starting from e. So even after moving out of Estonia, you will be able to access the services, and this would be thanks to the residency card, because it gives you access to all these systems, despite the fact that you might be miles away from Estonia. The next benefit is that with the e-residency card, you can also establish and manage a company online. So I know that you had a webinar about this topic, you might have already some understanding of how does the process of establishing a company looks like when you are still in Estonia. Well, e-residency would help you to establish a company after moving out from Estonia. So if you are not ready to start your company now, you need some time to think, that's okay. With e-residency card, you have this time, and you can establish a company whenever you feel that it's the right time to do. So it does not require you to be physically in Estonia. The only thing you need to have is the internet connection and your residency card, and basically you're good to go. And of course, another benefit is to be able to stay connected to Estonia. This card will give you a sense that you are still a member of Estonian society. You will be able to retain your personal code that you have now. So despite the fact that you will transition from resident to e-resident and your status will change, you will still have the same digital identity code that you have right now. So you will be able to access all information about yourself that has been gathered while you lived here in Estonia. And you will also be able to use all the services, even being miles away from Estonia. So here I will give the floor to my colleague, Mats, and he will give you a short overview of how e-residency was created and what does it give to Estonia as a nation.
Yeah, pleasure to get to know to all of you. So many of you probably know Estonia quite well, but the e-residency, like most e-governance, dates back to, the roots of it date back to 1990s. And it was a time that Estonian statehood, we got it back very suddenly, and our government had to improvise a lot. So Estonia didn't have any money, it didn't have any army, it was really behind technology, and it sort of wanted to make up for a lost time. And also our first government, our first elected prime minister was at 32 years old, which at the time was quite unusual, perhaps not today so much anymore. And also all of our government and most of the civil servants were sacked, and you had basically 20-year-olds and maybe 30-year-olds heads of department. So it was all new people, and there was a lot of wish to sort of renew the country, and there was also a choice to have very liberal economic policy in general, and really to make a technological jump in a way. So there was a time that we were offered, I think, because when you made a call to Finland, which is 80 kilometers from Tallinn, the call actually went through St. Petersburg physically, the wiring. And Finland offered us their old, I think, telephone lines from 1970s. And the government sort of said no, that we want to embrace the future, and we really want to have the newest sort of forms of technology, and also embrace the internet fully. So throughout the 1990s, they started experimenting with things, and in 2000, all of our citizens were given an ID card, which all of you who are EU nationals, you probably have an Estonian ID card. Looks very similar to our e-residency card as well, but there's your photo on it. And those who are from outside the EU, you would have a residence permit card, but essentially the chip on it works the same for citizens and also for e-residents. So it's the same technology that they started in 2000 with that card, and slowly putting all kinds of services on. Until recently, you couldn't get married, divorced, and buy or sell property with it. But now actually some notary deals can be done online as well. So even that is changing. But as far as I know, you still can't get married or divorced as a citizen. And the idea of e-residency, it sort of came out of a hackathon. We recently had a couple of hackathons, if you saw, It's basically where a lot of mostly tech business people come up and they sort of explore different ideas. They brainstorm a lot and they sort of figure which business ideas or which public policy ideas to put forward. And EResidency grew out of one of those, and the whole idea was basically to open Estonia's digital infrastructure to foreigners. And initially, we didn't really know what is to come out of it. We thought that safe digital identification would be the biggest, the most valued form, because Estonia has a very high standard of cybersecurity and digital security. So that is something that the EResidency card also offers. But we didn't know at the time how it will all play out. So in a way, it was a bit of a national startup as we saw it. It was an idea. We didn't know where it's going to go. We're the first one in the world to do something similar. And yeah, we've learned a lot because we're 5.5 years old now. Can we have the next slide? So the next slide sort of gives you an answer of where we've gone. So initially we thought that it would be people would use it for safe identification online, but actually I think the biggest, the most popular use is to create and run companies. And for us, it's actually a big surprise because we thought in a lot of countries it'd be quite easy to create and run a company. But even inside a lot of EU countries, it's still quite cumbersome procedure. You often need a lawyer, you need a lot of money, you need a lot of time and bureaucracy at your hands. And even people who create startups, or like if they're freelancers, they create a small company, it just takes too much money and time and effort to create a company in their home country. So it's quite interesting that some of them have made e-residency work for them and have created a company online. And the whole idea with e-residency is that you can have a company in Estonia, but you never have to step into this country for bureaucracy. You can do it from wherever you are. So there is a part of e-residents, maybe let's say 15-20%, we don't know exactly, who call themselves digital nomads. So they keep traveling around all the time. They don't have residency in any place. They keep traveling forever, and they do their work from their laptop basically. And some of them are very active e-residents, and they really make it work for them. And obviously, when you run a company from abroad, the company is not where you live officially. You always get the question with tax. And those people who don't have like a permanent residence in any country, for them it's easiest to also do the corporate taxation in Estonia, because this is something that's very advantageous in Estonia's case. Yeah, can we have the next slide? And here you can see some e-residents. The e-residency, of course, can't happen with without e-residents, because they are the people it's sort of for. And you can see a couple of different cases here. They've all created companies with e-residency. So Asep and Retno from Indonesia, I believe they're based in Bali, and they have a farming technology, and most of their clients are in Europe. So e-residency company helps them accept international payments. Emre and Sinan are based in Turkey, the Turkish e-residents, and they have a digital marketing company. And again, it sort of helps with EU clients, it helps with payment platforms. Vicky is a Scotswoman. She's not particularly a fan of Brexit. She usually sort of mentions that when she gives a talk. And she wants to sort of keep one foot in the EU. She has, I think she's been part of 3 technology companies that she's helped to create. And she also wants to keep a link with the EU science funding opportunities. So she wants to do part of her science and research in Estonia. But all these people are from outside the European Union, but actually about half of our e-residents are from the inside of the EU. And why we sort of, I mean, it's been a bit of a surprise that inside the EU it's as popular, but one of the reasons is that sometimes in the past it has been difficult for some people to get bank accounts in Estonia, but currently it's not as much an issue because there's a lot of fintech companies that basically create you a bank account online. So that is the reason why we have maybe a big proportion of EU-based e-residents today. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Max. We're actually always really happy to hear stories of e-residents because most of them have very interesting both personal and professional stories, and especially the process, how did they arrive to the decision to move their business to Estonia. So if you are interested to read more stories, we have a blog. So if you Google EResidency blog, you will find our page, and there you will be able to read more stories of real people who use the residency to establish their businesses here in Estonia. But now let's go to the details of how to become an e-resident. So for you who are international students and currently residing in Estonia, the process of becoming an e-resident starts actually from transitioning from resident to e-resident. So as I already mentioned, your personal identification number will remain the same, just your status, legal status in the eyes of Estonian government will change. As Mats already mentioned, essentially the digital ID card that is issued to residents and the e-residency digital ID card that is issued to people who are neither citizens nor residents of Estonia, they are essentially the same. And this is the reason why you can't have both at the same time. So if you are currently holding a residence permit, you can't apply for a residency. This means that your residence permit or right of residence needs to be expired before you can submit the application for e-residency. What this means in practice that most likely you would be able to apply for e-residency once you are back to your home country. But the good news is that you can do it online. There is no need to visit any Estonian governmental offices. Everything can be done from your home. You just need a computer and internet connection. One important notice for EU citizens that in addition to the process that I already described, you will need to make one more step. Specifically, you will need to notify the population registry here in Estonia that you actually left the country, because it might be the situation that your right of residence has expired, but you are still listed in the population registry as a resident of Tallinn, for example, and in this case, your application will not be accepted. So this is something to keep in mind. But really, this procedure is pretty quick. It might sound quite complicated, maybe, or lengthy, but it really doesn't take much time. So by transitioning from resident to e-resident, you will still keep your digital identity here in Estonia. So you'll be able to access all information about yourself and everything what was collected about you in terms of governmental institutions while you were living here in Estonia. So this e-residency card in this sense gives you a sense of continuity, that despite the fact that you move away, you are still part of Estonia. And as I mentioned, the application can be submitted completely online. Here you can see the address of the application page, and the only time when you will need to actually physically go somewhere is to pick up your card. So since it is a governmental document and there are some security requirements, we can't send the card by mail to your home address. In order to collect your card, you will need to visit one of the official pickup locations that are able to issue the e-residency cards. As I mentioned, this is due to security requirements because you need to be identified. So you'll be asked to show your personal documents such as passport or ID card, and your biometrics, more specifically fingerprints, will be taken at this pickup point. Only after these actions are performed, you will be given the e-residency card. So before you apply, it would be a good idea to go to our website and check the list of available pickup locations. Estonia, as you know, is quite a small country, and unfortunately, we don't have pickup locations in every single country in the world. So if you live in Europe, most likely there is a pickup location in your country of origin or country of residence. If you come from Latin America, that might be a little bit more complicated, and you might need to travel to another country in order to pick up your e-residency card. So this is something to consider before you apply for e-residency. Now, if we look at the application process, it looks like this. So basically, there are 5 simple steps. First of all, you need to gather the documents for your application. By documents, we mean the copy of your identity document. So most likely it's your passport, or it's ID card if you are EU citizen. You also need the passport style photo of yourself, a motivation statement in which you just basically explain why you are applying for your e-residency and why do you want to keep connection to Estonia. And finally, you will need a credit card to pay the state fee for this card. So as I mentioned already, the application can be submitted online, and at the end of this application, you'll be asked to pay the state fee. The state fee currently is between 100 and 130 euros. The exact amount will depend on the pickup location you choose. This state fee needs to be paid only once. So once you pay this fee, you get your residency card, and there are no fees related to being an e-resident. So your residency card is valid for 5 years. There is no annual fee. That's the only fee that the state fee paid during the application is the only fee that you need to pay in order to get the e-residency card. And again, most likely you will need to apply after your residence permit or right of residence expires, and you are no longer considered a resident of Estonia. So once you submit your application, it will go to the Estonian Police and Border Guard Board. So most likely you already have experience with this institution. They also issue ID cards for Estonian residents. They're involved in the visa process. So they are also the institution that is reviewing the e-residency applications and issuing the e-residency cards. So usually it takes 30 days for them to review applications. Sometimes it might take less time, sometimes more. It might also happen that the officer who is working on your case will need some additional information about you. In this case, you would receive an email from the Estonian Police and Border Guard Board. So after you apply, make sure that you are regularly checking your emails and also spam box, because sometimes notifications end up there. So once you are granted the residency card will be printed here in Estonia, and it will be sent out to the pickup location. As a rule, it takes between 2 to 5 weeks for your residency card to reach the pickup location. And once it is there and ready for you to go and collect it, you will again receive an email notification basically saying that your card has arrived to the pickup location. You need to make an appointment and pick it up. And once you have a residency kit in your hands, you will find their instructions about how to activate your card. So you would need to install the ID card software. Most likely you already have it on your computer. If not, it's a really simple process. And once you have installed the software, you have activated your residency card, you are good to go, and you can access all the Estonian services. Now, if you want to establish a company, there is a little bit different process of how does it work. So here I will again give the floor to my colleague Mats, and he will very shortly talk about this process.
Sure. So this is a process for people, obviously, who never stepped their foot into Estonia, how to create a company here. So essentially, first you just need to get the residency card, but obviously if you were a student here and you already had some other identification document, you could create a company with that as well, technically speaking. But what people need in long term is a service provider. So essentially, by Estonian law, to have a company, you need a contact person and an address in Estonia. And we advise to do that not to a friend's flat, because sometimes people move places. It's they're difficult to reach or etc. So there are companies that give that to a relatively reasonable price. We have a marketplace on our website, so you can check partners and options there. And often these companies also offer you then bookkeeping services or any key advice that you need for running your company. Then you can register your company once you have this, you've found a service provider. You can do that fully online. You don't have to come to Estonia. And then you can, after that, find a banking partner. So most e-residents choose one of the fintech companies. The fintech companies are not traditional banks, but there's not much difference between them and traditional banks anymore. So the only key difference is that usually they don't give business loans, but they usually have a bank card. You can accept payments, do payments. You have an IBAN code, so it's very much like a traditional bank actually, but you can do everything online, and they're often easier to run. But we do have one traditional banking partner as well, which is called the LHV Bank, one of the Estonian banks here. And for most e-residents who obviously they have to check background, they need to make sure what you do and everything. In most cases they do offer bank accounts, but we can't guarantee that to anyone. And also it needs one trip to Estonia currently. So they need that one face-to-face meeting. And then after you have your company up and running, then you can participate in our community. So we have about, as we mentioned before, about 69,000 e-residents. A lot of them are entrepreneurial people. And we try to do, events and things to give you advice on different topics, and also to offer, socializing or business connection opportunities. Can we have the next slide? Yeah, so e-residency is now 5.5 years old, so it's been in a constant development, as any sort of new program is. In a way, we belong to the state, but in another way, we have a very open startup attitude. So sometimes some things take more time than we'd like, but we have a lot of plans and things that are in development. And there's a couple of them mentioned here. One of them is the digital nomad visa. So it's for people who travel around a lot, but they like to spend time in Estonia and in Europe. So they would maybe half the time be in Estonia in a year, and then half the time travel around Europe, for example. They could use that as an opportunity. And this was supposed to be launched this summer, but due to COVID, we don't know exactly when it will be launched. But the Parliament continues to discuss it, and the government has supported this. There is also a plan to give healthcare and pensions to e-residents. So a lot of e-residents who are freelancers, they pay themselves a salary. They don't really get like a traditional pension or healthcare benefits because they keep traveling. And one accelerated program we have now in the government is looking into this. And we're also looking into, during the COVID situation, we are exploring the opportunity whether we could have a cardless option in the future for e-residency, so that people wouldn't have to go to an embassy and give their fingerprints and show their face, but they could do that through, let's say, a verification from distance on their mobile, for example. But that needs a lot of checks. It would be a very revolutionary thing in Estonia, because again, with e-residency, you can do anything. You can sign documents, you can do almost anything. So we need to make sure it's really fully up to the standard in Estonia and inside the European Union as well, because all the digital signatures given with e-residency cards or your own ID or residence permit cards, they're valid inside the entire European Union, same way as in Estonia. Can we have the next slide? And we have quite a bit of resources as well. So those who are interested to create or run a business, there's a lot you can learn from. There's a business guide which talks about huge amounts of topics, from taxation to a number of issues. There are a lot of user cases on our blog, and there's a lot of resources also on our knowledge base. So you can see and explore and really learn a lot what interests you. Yeah, can we have the next slide? And we also have ERICA, which is the first sort of NGO created by EResidents, run by EResidents. And they were supposed to have the big EResidency festival this year in May. Fortunately, didn't take place because of COVID, but hopefully it'll take place in the future. And we also have our big conference, Latitude 59, which will now take place in August, end of August, and will be part online and part physically in Estonia. So this is also something you can keep an eye on if you're interested in tech and startups. And many EResidents come to Estonia for that time. But then what we've learned from EResidents is that a lot of them, even if they keep traveling a lot, especially the digital nomads, they sometimes feel quite lonely and they would like to have opportunity to engage with each other. We try to ensure that it's also a community, not just a business opportunity. Thanks, Lena. I'll pass on back to you.
Thank you, Matt. So we started this presentation by showing you a photo of our office. So I would also like to finish this presentation by showing our great team. So these are the people that are working on the residency program. And the interesting fact is that some of the team members are actually foreigners. Some of them were also studying in Estonia or were big fans of EResidency, and now they are working for EResidency. So we have Hanna from Australia, we have Alex from US, we have Gökçe from Turkey, and also me. I'm not Estonian, I'm Lithuanian, and I've also studied here in Estonia. I'm trying to remember the year, but it was a while ago, as an exchange student. So I spent half a year here, and then I moved back to my country. I lived in some other countries, and at some point I moved back to Estonia, and here I am working for EResidency. So what I'm trying to say here is that the team who is working for EResidency, it's an international team. All our team members have traveled a lot, they have studied in different countries. So we really understand the needs and also the situation that most of you guys are in, or the people who are digital nomads and trying to establish their business. And we are trying to make EResidency as useful as possible. So at this point, I think we are ready to receive questions from you, and we would be happy to answer to them.
All right, thank you so much, Lena and Mats, for that presentation. It seems we don't have a lot of questions at the moment yet, but you still have an opportunity to write them in the questions box, and we'll get to them as soon as you write them. There were a few technical questions here. I will address those. Yes, we will be sharing the recordings of the webinar. And also to those of you who wanted to know the previous webinars as well, we can send those links to you. That's no problem. But maybe while you were thinking of your questions, I'll ask some of my own to Lena and Mats. So do you know statistics as well? How many of the EResidents that we currently have are people that have never set foot in Estonia or never been here physically?
I think we try to research that, but we don't have them. Yeah, we don't have them, at least today. Yeah.
Okay, but what does your gut tell you?
We'd like to know more. I mean, we have lots of ideas, such as giving e-residents like I think cheaper way to travel on public transport, and we've had many ideas out there, but we have to work on this bit actually to make e-residency sort of more attractive and just for people who don't want to do a company. So this is something we're looking at.
I would also add that although I suppose that the majority of EResidents have not been to Estonia physically, what we've seen throughout the history of the program that at some point EResidents are actually making the trip to Estonia, either just to see the country that they have established their business in, or to make business connections, or perhaps to move their business physically to Estonia. So we are seeing more and more that e-residents are actually making some physical connections to Estonia as a country as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome. So we had a question come in, and the question is, what kind of companies are people usually opening with e-residency?
I would say it's maybe about 5 categories. So the biggest in numbers are those that you can do distance work with. Now, with COVID, we know you can do distance work with almost not everything, but a lot of different trades. But those that were considered, you can work from your laptop beforehand. So anything IT, programming, digital marketing, any kinds of consulting. I would say these are the main categories. Often it's also the people who maybe they have a main job, but they do a consulting thing on the side for themselves. Maybe they have one company in the home country, but they also have a lot of international clients, and they want to sort of do the other company in a more beneficial way because Estonia has a very attractive tax system. Our corporate income tax is delayed, so you don't have to pay it until you really take out dividends. And also in a lot of countries, you actually have to the country predicts how much your tax revenue will be, and they charge it to your head. So you're kind of loaning to the government, like the other way around. So I think a lot of people, who work from distance, they really want to benefit from it.
Mm-hmm. We have another question. Is e-residency preferred for companies that provide services or also by those involved in trade and manufacture of physical goods, keeping in mind the import tax?
So yes, I would say like there's no written rule there. Like it's technically you can do any company and do it with e-residency company, but tax is the core issue there. So I would say the less physical it is, the more it's sort of service, the more it's fully online, the easier it is to do the taxation from Estonia or partly from Estonia. It also obviously concerns the ownership structure, whether you have employees in Estonia and other issues that really determine where you have to do your corporate taxation. But I would say the more sort of service-led, the more online it is, the easier it is to do with e-residency.
Mm-hmm. All right, so a few more questions here. So we have a question from a student who is here doing the second year of master studies. And the question is, if I want to think about running a business, do I have to go to e-residency to have information or run it? So I'm thinking the question is that they're here right now, they're looking to start a company. So I take it if they're physically here, it would be wise for them to start up their company. And can they take it over later if they have e-residency? Or can they transition in that way?
Yes, of course. So as I mentioned, the residency can be granted only to those who are not residents of Estonia. So if the student who is asking the question is currently residing in Estonia, he or she can open a company using the ID card that she or he has at the moment. There is no need, or basically even I would say there's no chance that he would get the residency at the moment. But what happens when this person wants to move away from Estonia? If there wouldn't be e-residency, basically he or she would lose any connection to the company here in Estonia, and in order to manage it, constant trips to the country would be needed. But by having e-residency card, the personal identification number will remain the same, and all the things that were connected to this personal identification number, including the company, will be transferred to e-residency card. So in this way, he or she will be able to run the company remotely as well.
Yeah, I would also mention that almost everyone gets to be an e-resident. So this is purely a technical hurdle that they say that if you have a residence card already or Estonian ID card for EU citizens, that you don't get it. Immediately that you sort of give that status up, then you can become an e-resident. All the government wants to know is who you are. And actually, if you've lived in Estonia, they already know who you are, basically. The key rule is that don't lie to the government if they ask you, I don't know, for details and things. That's it. And don't be a criminal.
That's a good suggestion. Okay, so is it the same for an EU citizen as well? If it's an EU citizen that founded an OÜ company here and then leaves Estonia, they also need e-residency to retain access to the digital services and to running their company? Or is it different for EU people?
So they just have to notify that they've left Estonia, and then their ID card will become expired by that. I understand. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. But also for EU citizens, there are certain citizenships that also can have access to Estonian e-services. For example, the Belgian ID card, the Lithuanian ID card, and there is a couple of other ones. They can also get access to Estonian e-systems. So it might be that after leaving Estonia, you will not need to apply for e-residency because the card of your country of citizenship will give you access to e-services anyway. However, the transferring credentials of the company to your ID card of the country of citizenship might also involve some paperwork, but I believe that it's quite a smooth process.
I would just add that Estonia also has a digital ID that a lot of citizens and also residents can have. So the digital ID won't be cancelled after you leave or after you've cancelled your right to be here, so ID card or residence card. You can keep that and also use that as an e-residency card for a while. But after that expires and you're not a resident, then you can only get e-residency. But yeah, the digital ID is a bit cheaper. That's the difference. And also the one more thing is that you can always sign up for our mailing list, even if you're not e-resident. So we do a lot of webinars, we have a lot of support, a lot of interesting stuff. So if you're interested in running or creating a company, you can always sign up on our website for our mailing list.
Mm-hmm. And now a question that I think a lot of people in the beginning will have when they hear about e-residency. Does e-residency allow a person to stay in Estonia if they've established their company, but they don't have a residence permit? So I'll let you answer that.
Mm-hmm. So basically, as I mentioned, the residency is a digital status. So it does not automatically give you access of resident right of residence here in Estonia. But if you decide to physically establish your business here, you will have another reason to apply for a residence permit. So you might end up actually living in Estonia, but the process would be separate from e-residency. E-residency as such is not considered a reason to stay here in Estonia.
Mm-hmm. And another question that I think you talked about already as well is that if one is based out of Estonia, then is it possible to apply for e-residency? So I guess you can't apply for e-residency if you already have another residence permit or base of residence for you.
Yes, of course. E-residency, it does not have any influence on your existing citizenships or residence permits. It's a digital status. So yes, you can apply while being away from Estonia. And the only thing what you need to consider is that you might need to travel to another country to pick up the residency card, as we don't have pickup locations in every country.
Also, there's some EU nationals who just sometimes they visit Estonia randomly, they don't live here, but also you can actually pick up your e-residency card here, but you can't have a non-expired ID or residency card. That's the point when you apply.
Mm-hmm. So one of my own questions then, you said that you can't apply for e-residency if you're, for example, a student here and you're here with a residence permit for studying. You can't have two sort of residences at the same time. But what if it's a case the other way, is that a person applies for e-residency first, maybe opens up their company even, and then later on decides to move to Estonia, for example, or come here to work. What will happen to their e-residency status then if they get a residence permit here?
As far as I know, again, I might be mistaken, a e-residency card won't be cancelled, but the status will be changed. So the status will become a resident, but the card will remain. And because the card looks exactly like a digital ID card, actually, so the card will remain like a digital ID card, more or less. And actually, this is also something that we highly welcome. We've seen e-residents come to Estonia and build a company here. At some point, they might need to be physically here, especially if they really build something that needs more employees or like a startup, because this is also something that people can do. If they run a company in Estonia that qualifies as a startup, because Estonia has very clear, like a sort of a recipe what the startup needs to be. They can also apply and register their company in Estonia startup database. And there's a lot of big support ecosystem for startups. There's a lot of advice you can get, and also it's easier for you to move here as a founder, or also move employees here from third countries if the company is registered as a startup. So this status is only there. The company has to be less than 10 years old. The business model has to be scalable and has to be sort of a tech related thing. I think these are the base criteria. But this is something that Startup Estonia runs. Startup Estonia has people on it, and you can write to them if you're interested in that. And obviously, it sells a lot more if you say, like, I have a company, that everyone can have a company, but I have a startup. Everyone's like, oh, what is that about? So I think this is something exciting you can all look into as well.
Yeah, and I think we discussed Startup Estonia a little bit in our last webinar as well, where we talked about how to start a company in Estonia. So they are a really good sort of source of information to turn to if this is your interest. So we have another question here about investing. Can I invest in Estonia or other EU companies through my e-residency or e-residency company?
Yes. I mean, the Estonian tax system is made in a way that, let's say you make your company makes X thousand of euros of profit in a year, right? But you don't take that out in dividends, but you keep it in a company account or you reinvest it. Then you're not taxed until the moment you really take out dividends. So that has been a reasonable way, because people might want to, sort of create a scheme out of it, but essentially it's made in a way that people can grow their capital and wealth. And only at the moment that they really take out dividends, then they're taxed. So a lot of people actually do that. They keep the Estonian company as a sort of pension fund, maybe, and then once they retire, then they will be paying the income tax. So once they just need the money in that way.
Okay, so I see we don't have any new questions coming in. So maybe I'll wrap up with one last question from my end. You mentioned that on your website there are stories from other e-residents that have created their companies. Is there also a network or community where e-residents will be able to connect with each other to either ask for advice or maybe find a potential business partner or something like that?
So as Mats already mentioned, there is a community called EReCA. So if you are interested in becoming a member of a more official organization that is working with e-residents, that would be the place to go. But if you are just a fan of e-residency and you want to get to know other e-residents or ask a question, there is a very active community on Facebook. So if you would search for e-residents of Estonia, you will find this group. I believe we have almost 10,000 people there, or even more. Mats, do you remember?
Yeah, I think 14,000. So this is a really good place where you can get the information directly from other e-residents.
And it's really active group. So if you have some doubts about whether e-residency would be a good solution for you, just ask your question there, and people who are already e-residents will be able to share their own experience and give you some advice. So Facebook would be probably the best place to start from.
All right, and in the meantime, one more question came in about applying specifically. A link. I take it the wisest would be to visit your website, and all the necessary steps and forms will be available there. So I added the link to the chat. Hopefully everyone can see that. So make sure to definitely have a look at the information there. If you run into any questions, obviously there's ways to reach out and ask. And if you do want to get other people's first-hand experience, then the EResidence group on Facebook, I think it will be a wonderful resource as well. Other than that, we have run out of questions. We're also running out of time. It will be 11 in 5 minutes. So I want to thank Mats and Lina for their time today in discussing the EResidency. I really hope it's been helpful. And I hope Study in Estonia will be back with some more webinars, but I think we'll take a little bit of a break for the summer season. And hopefully we'll see you all soon in another webinar. So thanks again, Lina and Mats.
Thank you so much for inviting.
End of the year to everyone. Hopefully it'll be a good summer to everyone.
Awesome. But everyone stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you at another webinar sometime in the future. Okay, bye everyone.
Bye.